Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, Bill Estep will join us after retiring from covering Central and Eastern Kentucky for 40 years for the Lexington Herald-Leader. We'll hear some stories. And Democratic candidate for Congress Cherlynn Stevenson is here first. Stevenson is a former state representative who now wants to serve Central Kentucky and Washington. It may be a crowded race. She already faces former Lexington Councilman David Kloiber for the Democratic nomination. Republican State Representative Ryan Dotson is often running for his party's nomination. Former State Senator Ralph Alvarado is among those considering, and now Deanna Frazier Gorton has entered the race on the GOP side. The seat is open because Republican Congressman Andy Barr is running for the U.S. Senate. He defeated Democrat Ben Chandler back in 2012, so the seat has gone back and forth between the parties over the years. Democratic congressional candidate Cherlynn Stevenson joining us on Kentucky Newsmakers, and we welcome you. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me, Bill.
Tell us, for those who don't know you, give us some background and why you've decided to run for Congress.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the eastern part of the state, so I'm a good mountain girl. Grew up in Knott County, was born and raised there. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a coal miner. Came to Lexington after graduating from Morehead State University to do internships. Met my husband and have never left. So I've called Lexington home since January of 1999 and just love serving my community. I stepped up in 2018 to run when public education and public pensions were being threatened in Frankfort. And now, I feel the call again to step up. We're seeing a lot of chaos and a lot of uncertainty coming out of Washington, D.C. With health care being threatened, with food assistance, cuts on the table. I just feel like it's time to step up again and try to serve the community.
Is there a belief that one member of Congress can make much difference in a situation like that?
I think that they can, but I think that it's time that the people of Central Kentucky have a champion, somebody who is going to bat for working families and talking about the issues that matter to them, about health care, about raising wages, about stopping some of the chaos that we're seeing here from the tariffs that we're seeing, and not somebody that rolls over and wants to cut taxes so that billionaires can have a big old tax break.
Do you anticipate that the recently passed federal spending plan will be a big issue in the race? The tax cuts were extended.
Yes.
Federal taxes were taken off of tips and overtime.
Right.
But to get there were these cuts to Medicaid and SNAP benefits. So is all that going to continue to be debated over the course of this, what could be a long campaign between now and November of next year?
26. There's a lot in there, Bill. It was a huge bill, almost 1,000 pages. And so let's start first with the tax cuts. You said no taxes on tips or overtime, but there is a threshold for that. And after that threshold is met, folks will lose their standard deduction. So they're probably going to be hit. It's not as great as it sounds. The only permanent tax cuts in that bill were for billionaires. And so I think that that's something that we really need to talk about and that people need to understand. And then, of course, there was, the cuts to Medicaid, the cuts to SNAP. We have significant numbers here in Kentucky that are going to be affected by that, and the numbers are alarming. We have almost 195,000 Kentuckians that could lose their health care. We have 75,000 that could lose food assistance. Those are real people. We've got to think about that. Those are husbands and wives and moms and dads and sons and daughters, and they stand a real chance to be hurt. But also, on the other side of that, we have 35 rural hospitals that are in danger of closing, 6 of those right here in the 6th district. And that will create ripple effects across the communities that we have here.
There is supposedly a $50 billion rural health fund that is supposed to help mitigate that.
Right.
Do you believe it will?
Well, I think it can some, but I think that what it could also do is just buy a little time. I think that you're going to see a lot of these healthcare agencies having to have some really hard conversations about what that means. We're already seeing that in the news. And those are just hospitals. We're not talking about clinics. We're not talking about nursing homes yet. And I fear that we have, some devastation that could really happen across Kentucky and especially right here in central Kentucky.
Let me ask you on the tax cuts, with the 2017 cuts being extended and made permanent now, that does bring down some of the brackets. Do you support that part?
Well, I mean, I think anything that's going to give any kind of relief to working families is good, but why are the ones for billionaires permanent and the ones for working families only temporary? That's my big problem, because we're doing that all in the name of giving these billionaires this huge tax cut. So people should not have to be losing their health care. They shouldn't have to be giving up food assistance in order for billionaires to just line their pockets more and more.
Congressman Andy Barr recently told us that he can't think of anything that he disagrees with President Trump about. Is it safe to say that you bring a vastly different perspective to this race and therefore would considerably change the way this district would be represented in Washington?
Yes, absolutely. Again, this district deserves somebody that's going to go to bat for them. Our farmers, our small businesses, our working families absolutely deserve representation instead of somebody who's going to just roll over and give, billionaires and Elon Musk and all the billionaire buddies a tax break, because that's absolutely what's happening here.
How involved do you expect the National Democratic Party to be in this race, given that you could be looking at a razor-thin majority on either side next year? The stakes are high. So are you talking to the National Party? Yeah,
we're having conversations with leaders here in Kentucky and in D.C. There's a lot of excitement about this race. There's a lot of potential here that a lot of people see. Crystal Ball has actually moved their projections for this district based on my candidacy. So we think that there's a lot of momentum. We think that, a lot of families are struggling. I'm hearing that across the district. There's so much chaos coming out of D.C. right now that it's creating so much uncertainty here. And I think people are ready for a change. I think that they feel like they deserve better than what they're getting right now in D.C.
Would you feel obligated to vote along party lines most of the time if the fundraising clearly is coming from Democratic-leaning sources? And that seems to be what we have in Washington right now.
Well, I am somebody who takes that representative title very seriously. You saw this when I served in Frankfort for 6 years, and I will do what is best for my people. I am not there to serve a party. I'm not there to serve anyone other than the people that I answer to right here in the 6th Congressional District. I would break from my party sometimes. I represented a red district, or what some would call a purple district. And it very much mirrors the CD6 as well. And so, I think I'm a good fit. I think I listen more than I talk. And I think that this is a great opportunity for working families, farmers, small businesses to gain a voice back into D.C. that they haven't had in a while.
You very narrowly lost re-election to your seat in Frankfort. Do you think you'd be taking this step if you had won another term in the State House?
It's hard to say, Bill. I'm not sure. You can look back and woulda, coulda, shoulda all you want to, but like the good Kentucky girl I am, I fell off the horse, but I got up and dusted myself off and hopped back on. And as my husband and I were talking about what comes next for us, and the new administration was taking hold in D.C., we started questioning, what's next for us, what's next for Central Kentucky. And when my people started losing health care and losing food assistance, I could not stand by and not do anything. So I had to step up again, just like I stepped up in 2018 to fight in Frankfort.
What factors make you believe that you can win in a larger congressional district when you lost in a House district?
Well, I think circumstances are different now, but really, Bill, it's about the environment that we find ourselves in, and it's the fact that Kentucky families are feeling the squeeze. We have all of this chaos. It feels like we're on a roller coaster ride, and that roller coaster ride has driven the cost of eggs up and nest eggs down. And it's happening all across the district. I'm hearing this worry about this uncertainty from families. They're worried, about their jobs. They're worried about health care. And really, it's about getting out, meeting people where they are, having these conversations with them, listening to their hopes and their dreams, listening to their fears and what they're worried about every night, and just letting them know that I am willing to be their champion. For 6 years, I stood up against healthcare cuts in Frankfort. I stood up against SNAP benefits being cut in Frankfort. I've fought for working families over and over. I have fought for public education. I am a fighter. As you mentioned, that district was purple or kind of red, so I have won by razor-thin margins and I have lost by a razor-thin margin. All I know how to do is fight. I came out of a super minority in the legislature, so if folks here want a fighter to go to Washington, D.C. for them, I'm their girl.
You mentioned the Medicaid and SNAP benefits repeatedly. Do you support the work requirements for access to those benefits?
Well, you know, I think it's really hard, because I think that ultimately what those do is they just create barriers and extra hoops for people to jump through. And when somebody is trying their very best to keep food on the table and a roof over their kid's head, that creating extra barriers that is just red tape for the sake of red tape is not good. I mean, I believe that people deserve access to quality, affordable health care, and no child should ever go to bed hungry.
To make it to the general election, you first have to win the Democratic primary,
Yep.
and former Lexington Councilman David Klober is also in the race. He ran for mayor in 2022 and spent $500,000 of his own money,
Yep.
which got him on TV, let him buy name recognition. Do you have a plan to compete with that if he chooses to do such again?
Well, of course, I don't have my own money to put into the race, but you know, we have already been on the phones a lot to be sure that we have the resources that we need to get our message out. And you know, Bill, I am a boots on the ground kind of girl. In almost all of my races for state rep, we knocked about 30,000 doors. That's a very, very small district and a lot of doors. So I expect to be out there and talking to people, and you know, that's free. So we're out there just talking to folks, listening to them, listening to their concerns. I have no doubt that we'll have the resources to do everything that we need to do. So that's not a concern that I have right now. We're working really hard. We've had a lot of great momentum ever since that we announced. It has just been, you know, pedal to the metal. I'm proud that I've been endorsed by about 35 different Kentucky people and organizations, including Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman. We've got a lot of momentum, and we are not going to let up until November 2026.
After the Democratic losses in the national election a few months ago, there was all this talk that the party had lost its ability to communicate with voters.
Right.
Do you agree with that, and do you think that you do know how to connect with voters in this district?
Well, I think I do. Again, I have served a purple district for 6 years, and constituent services was something that I took a lot of pride in listening to people, trying to help them solve their problems and also solve the big problems that we had by working across the aisle to get things done in Frankfort. I do believe that we have a great path to victory, that we are going to meet people where they are. We're going to listen, and we absolutely can get there, and we have a lot of momentum on our side. We're really excited to get out and meet the people, and we absolutely believe that we can flip the district.
Is there a term along the political spectrum that would define you think? Liberal, moderate, conservative?
You know, I tend to tell people a lot that I'm a mountain Democrat. You know, I hail from Knott County, and I think that really sums me up. But again, I take that title of representative very seriously, and so I will match what the district needs me and wants me to do.
Fair to say fundraising right now is the main focus, and you're off to do some retail campaigning as well.
Oh, absolutely. Right? Yeah. You know, we're dialing for dollars every day and holding fundraisers, but we're out across the district already. We've been to almost all of the counties already, are already planning to go back several times to get out there and talk to people, because that's really what it's about. This district, you know, it is varied. It's got about 45% of the vote's going to come from Fayette County, but everything else is rural, and I'm a rural Kentuckian myself. So I'm anxious to get out and talk to folks and let them know that I understand what they're going through. I understand small town Kentucky, but we're really looking forward to the race, to getting out and talking with folks. We know that we're going to have the resources that we need.
Yeah, it's an interesting district, isn't it?
It is a very interesting district. It's going to be. It's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to drawing the contrast between my opponents and myself, and letting the folks decide.
Cherlynn Stevenson, Democratic candidate for Congress in the 6th District. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Bill Estep will be with us next from the Lexington Herald-Leader after retiring after 40 years of covering southern and eastern Kentucky. We're back in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. Bill Estep just wrapped up nearly 40 years at the Lexington Herald-Leader, where he covered southern and eastern Kentucky. Over those decades, he saw it all, from the opioid crisis, the virtual collapse of the coal industry, to politicians, corruption, snake handlers. When he went through courthouses looking for documents, he found them, and his readers benefited from what he uncovered. He wrote more than 6,500 stories for the paper. Bill was a frequent panelist on KET's Comment on Kentucky over the years, and now finally has some free time. Bill, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate you having me on.
You and I shared a little office space in London, Kentucky back in the mid-1980s.
That was in 1985.
Yeah, I was for News Center 27, covering, as we called it in those days. That was before cell phones and laptops. Neither of us knew what was ahead, but congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thank you. Yeah, at one time I think I knew where every payphone in southeastern Kentucky was, because that's how you send in your stories. So
we knew what a phone book was.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit after that they invented the fax machine. So you did a series of stories called Prescription for Pain. It was revealing, called a lot of attention to the opioid crisis. It helped a lot of people understand the extent of the problem, including Congress.
Congressman Rogers told me, well, OxyContin was really what created the opioid crisis in eastern Kentucky and Kentucky generally, and a lot of other places as well. And that came in the late 90s, 99, 2000 time frame. And within just a couple of years, there were thousands of people addicted, and there'd been a lot of deaths. And so we started hearing about those problems, obviously. We were out on the ground, myself and a reporter that worked in Hazard at the time. And so our editor decided we would do a series of stories just to try to document the extent of the problem. And we did that along with some other reporters, Lee Mueller and Chuck Camp, that looked into the role of Purdue Pharma in that. That was the company that made it and was pushing it, and later pleaded guilty in federal court to a criminal charge based on their marketing of that. So we did that, and Congressman Hal Rogers, who represents Southern and Eastern Kentucky, said that I think it kind of helped him understand the extent of the problem, but he created Operation Unite with federal funding after that, and it's helped a lot of folks in Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah, there was doctor shopping. I mean, people would go from place to place, right. Fly out of state to clinics.
Well, there was, so when the legislature here in Kentucky kind of began grappling with it too, they created a monitoring system so that it was trying to cut down on the people would go to 5 and 6 different doctors, and the doctors didn't have a way to know that they'd already gotten a prescription somewhere else. So they set up the Casper system to monitor that, and that really helped that. But after that, then people started trying to find other ways to get it. So yeah, there was a flight out of Charleston, West Virginia, or Huntington, rather, to Florida. They would load up van loads of people, 10 or 12 people in a van, and drive to South Florida, where they had no monitoring system and pretty lax enforcement. So yeah, it was just a terrible problem for a long time.
And now the treatment landscape is different, and we seem to be getting some handle on it.
Well, the legislature's passed a number of laws that's helped with that. The state also expanded Medicaid, which made treatment available to a lot of people who couldn't have afforded it otherwise. And as I said, Unite, I checked a couple of weeks ago, been more than 5,000 people that have gotten to go to enter residential treatment with vouchers from Unite, which is federal funding and some state funding. But yeah, the landscape is a lot different now than it was, and we've started to see the overdose deaths coming down pretty significantly.
The coal industry was in decline even when your career started. We have seen that continue, and it's been very hard for the region to overcome.
It has. The coal industry, there was great times in the 70s, and it really started declining into the mid 80s when I started, and really never came back from that. The last high point was in the early 2000s and into 2011 was the last peak of employment, and in 2012 I think we lost something like 30% of all the coal jobs in Kentucky in 1 year in 2012. And it went down for several years after that. There's been a little bit of a recovery the last couple of years, but it's nothing. The employment is nothing like what it was even 15 years ago.
It's been, again, difficult for the region to figure out a way forward, hasn't it?
Well, it's been difficult for families that lost jobs, and it's been difficult for local governments that lost tax revenue. They've had to figure out how to grapple with that. I was at a fiscal court meeting once in 2012 in Knott County, where they were having to a major cut in their budget, trying to figure out what to do with that, and every county's dealt with that out in eastern Kentucky. And there's some things going on right now that to grapple with that further and try to improve the economy, but I don't think we've found the full answer to that yet.
Natural disasters along the way, obviously massive flooding in eastern Kentucky, tornadoes recently in Laurel County, years ago up in West Liberty and throughout the region.
I'd hoped to retire before I had to cover one more major disaster, but we had 3 this year before I got out. So you had the flooding in April, and a couple months after that again in eastern Kentucky. There were, I think, 40-some folks that died. And then, of course, the tornado in middle of May that hit Russell County, Somerset, and then in London, which got the worst of it, obviously. You had 19 people dead. So yeah, I mean, I've had to cover a lot of disasters through the year, some natural, some man-made. I covered the Carrollton bus crash in 1988, where there were 24 kids and 3 adults that died, and it never gets any easier.
We were both around for the Bop Trot scandal in Frankfurt when that was going on, all that went down.
I was there that day in the Capitol when the FBI showed up to start serving subpoenas and talking to folks, and it was like this shockwave that went through the Capitol, and then that resulted. Turned out to be the largest investigation of corruption in the legislature in Kentucky's history. Something like a dozen current and former legislators ultimately charged, and a prominent lobbyist and some other folks. So,
why is it so important to go through those court records as you do and government records and know what is going on within our government and our judicial system?
Well, I think that's part of our duty to help people understand what's going on in the world around them. I've always said and felt like that generally we in the media have a responsibility. It's a public service. We serve the public. I mean, it's a business on one level, obviously, but it's also a service to the public to help them understand what their government is doing to them and for them. And part of that is in those records, in city council records, in fiscal court records, in courts, and in the legislature. I mean, that helps people understand what's going on in their world.
Over those 40 years, did you self-assign a lot of the time, or did they tell you out of Lexington what they wanted covered?
I had the luxury a lot of my career of working out in the state, in our office in Somerset and other places around the state, and so I got to choose a lot of my own stories. I mean, that was just I always said it was the best job in the world. I mean, there's no place like Kentucky, no people like Kentuckians, and no stories like come out of there. So a lot of them I got to choose. I mean, obviously editors would see things and hear things and want me to track things down, but a lot of them I got to kind of figure out what was going on and report those myself.
You found some offbeat stories over the years, certainly. What stands out in that regard?
I always go back. I mean, I loved getting to meet the folks that handle snakes in church. Serpents is what they would refer to them as. I mean, it started in Knox County in 1988. There was a church where there's some division, and one church member swore out warrants against 4 others for handling snakes. And it went to district court, and the county attorney ultimately dismissed it based on religious freedom grounds. But that's how I met Pastor A.B. Smallwood and Ronnie Sizemore and some others at that church, a little tiny church in Knox County up on Stinking Creek. And asked them if I could come to church with them to understand their belief better. And I came away, I went into it, it's, a lot of people think it's crazy. I don't think that's a secret. And I had some of those same feelings, but I came away thinking they were some of the most committed, humble Christians I'd ever met. Just fine people.
We see a lot of national coverage these days of news, and people are kind of, driven by whatever is going on the internet or whatever social media at the time. Why is it so important that local journalism remains strong?
Because that's what affects your life the most. I mean, obviously, Congress does things that affects your taxes and a lot of different kind of policies, but I mean, your local, your city, your county, your local water board, those sorts of things, that's what affects your life immediately in terms of your taxes, your water rates, your local ordinances, things that are going to happen and be required of you, or things you can't do. I mean, I just think local news is what hits people first and ought to matter to them, and that's why we have an obligation to continue covering that.
What are you going to do now? You're trying to figure that out?
Still trying to figure it out. I don't know. My wife has some chores lined up for me, I think, and I'd like to travel some. That was one reason for getting out now. I'm still young enough to do some of that, so I'll just figure it out, I guess.
Many people have suggested there's a book in you, or 2 or 3.
Maybe. I don't know if I've got the stick-to-itiveness. I mean, I've had some folks suggest that, but I might just get lazy in my retirement and not do it.
Well, you wrote your own story for the Herald-Leader toward the end there in late June. It recalls your amazing career, and folks can look that up. But I wanted just to have you honor what you've done for Kentucky for those decades.
I appreciate it. I would have done it for free if I could have afforded to. But I mean, it's just like I say, to me, it was the best job in the world. It was a lot of fun, and I hope did some good along the way too. But I appreciate you having me on.
All right. Bill Estep, retired from the Lexington Herald-Leader. We'll wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers in a moment. We certainly appreciate you joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. A reminder that our coverage of the campaign ahead and all the latest news is always on air on WKYT News and online at WKYT.com and on our WKYT News app. Thanks again for joining us, and you make it a good week ahead.